A woman walked into Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom, her tone sharp and defiant from the very first moment. She snapped at him, insisting she would never pay the fine. "Do whatever you want," she said coldly. Judge Caprio, known for his patience and kindness, calmly suggested a payment plan to make things easier. But her attitude grew harsher. "I won't pay," she repeated. It was in that moment that the world's kindest judge, a man admired across the globe for his compassion, felt something rare within himself: anger. For the first time, Frank Caprio lost his composure in court. This incident was never broadcast on television, but he wrote about it years later in his book. And what followed became a turning point that would change his life forever. Who could have imagined it? A boy who once polished shoes to survive, a child who grew up in poverty, would one day be celebrated as the nicest judge in the world. Behind that warm smile, behind the jokes and the gentle words he became famous for, were scars, deep hidden wounds that shaped every decision he made in the courtroom. Frank Caprio was the chief judge of the Providence Municipal Court in Rhode Island. From 1985 to 2023, for 38 long years, he upheld justice in that role. His fame spread far beyond his city through a reality television show called Caught in Providence. The cases were simple traffic violations, illegal parking, speeding, red light tickets. Yet, what made him extraordinary wasn't the law itself, but how he delivered it. He turned hearings into moments of humanity. Sometimes he invited children sitting beside their parents to decide the verdict, filling the courtroom with laughter. Other times he embraced defendants, sharing in their struggles, offering comfort instead of judgment. One unforgettable day, a 96-year-old man stood before him, accused of speeding in a school zone. When Judge Caprio gently asked why, the old man's eyes filled with tears. He explained that he had been rushing his 63-year-old son to the hospital. His son was dying of blood cancer. Without hesitation, Caprio wished the man well and dismissed the case. No fine, no punishment, just compassion. Moments like these made him beloved, not only across America but across the world. Judges in other countries looked to him as a role model. Yet, behind the smiles and kindness lay a story of hardship, a story that forged him into the man he became. After retiring in 2023, he was diagnosed with cancer. In those difficult days, he began writing his memoir, Compassion in the Court, published in 2025. Within its pages, he revealed the roots of his empathy. His grandparents had migrated from Italy to Providence, unable to read or write, scraping by with almost nothing. His grandfather sold fruit from a pushcart to survive. One night, after drinking with friends, he was arrested for causing a disturbance. Desperate, Caprio's grandmother borrowed money from neighbors and went to court. She offered the judge the money in broken English, pleading for her husband's release. With her stood their young son, Antonio, nicknamed Tap, who spoke just enough English to translate. The judge looked at the boy and said, "Take your parents home. They are free." That small act of mercy left an imprint. Antonio would never forget it. He was just a boy then, but he grew up to become Frank Caprio's father. Years later, Frank often said, "Though this happened long before I was born, whenever I see immigrants in my courtroom, I remember my grandparents, and I try to make sure they suffer as little as possible." Antonio, or Tap, had grown up poor. 12 people crammed into a single room with no hot water, surviving by candlelight. He left school after the 7th grade to help support the family during the Great Depression. Sometimes his pockets were so empty that even cotton stuffing would have been a luxury. Yet, as Frank later wrote, we didn't even have that cotton. On November 24th, 1936, Frank Caprio was born. He lived with his parents, Tap and Philomena, in that same one-room home with freezing water. If he wanted to shower, he had to travel miles away. His father tried every kind of work, fruit carts, odd jobs, but nothing lasted. Finally, he found steady work delivering milk. From a young age, Frank helped him. One morning, when Frank was only 8, he delivered milk to the home of a wealthy man whose son happened to be his classmate. Hungry and shivering, Frank knocked at the door. Inside, the smell of toast and breakfast filled the air. His classmate sat at the table, crying as his father scolded him. The man pointed to Frank and said sternly, "Be grateful. If you weren't lucky, you'd be like that boy, carrying milk in the snow." Those words cut deep. 80 years later, Frank still remembered them, writing them in his book word for word. Life was brutal. During cold nights, Frank and his brother shared a single blanket, the same one used to keep the milk from freezing. Because of the cream stains, mice came crawling each night, terrifying the boys. Yet despite the misery, Frank remained grateful. His parents had instilled resilience, dignity, and kindness. When Frank was 16, his father placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "One day, you will be a lawyer. But remember, never take money from the poor." At the time, Frank was still in high school, juggling countless part-time jobs, delivering milk, distributing newspapers, setting up pins at a bowling alley, waiting tables, even polishing shoes on the roadside. After graduation, he entered a local college in Providence, becoming only the second among 45 cousins to attend. In his final year, he applied to Boston University Law School, his dream. But studying there meant giving up every part-time job, and he knew his parents couldn't afford it. Though admitted, he chose a different path, teaching during the day to support himself, while studying law at night in another university. It was during these years that humiliation struck again. After class one evening, a classmate offered him a ride home. When they arrived at Frank's shabby clapboard apartment, the classmate sneered, "If you want to be a successful lawyer, you can't live in a place like this." Frank never forgot that sting. He simply said, "Thank you," and walked inside, silently vowing never to let his circumstances define him. In time, Frank became a lawyer. He even stepped into politics, once running for attorney general. But rivals smeared him with false accusations of ties to organized crime, and his dream ended there. He returned quietly to practicing law. Until one afternoon, during lunch, his phone rang. The mayor of Providence was on the line. "One of the municipal judges has been transferred," the mayor said. "I believe you'd be perfect for the position." That moment was pure joy, not just for Frank, but for his parents. His father, who had once sat in the crowd at his wrestling matches, now proudly sat in the courtroom on Frank's very first day as judge. The first case was a woman burdened with hundreds of dollars in parking tickets. From the start, she was hostile, refusing to pay. Frank offered her an installment plan, but she snapped back, refusing outright. For the first time, anger flared. He ordered her car booted, effectively immobilized until she paid. After court, his father pulled him aside. Tapp's voice was firm. "How will that woman take her children to school now? How will she buy groceries?" That scolding cut deeper than any lecture in law school. Frank later admitted, "What my father taught me in that moment, I never learned in 5 years of legal education." It became the turning point of his life. From then on, before passing judgment, he always asked himself, what impact will this decision have on the family behind the defendant? He even established the Philomena Fund, named after his mother, to help those who could not afford their fines. Meanwhile, his younger brother Joe loved filming. One day, someone suggested he record court proceedings. Frank hated the idea, fearing it would make the courtroom a spectacle. But Joe persisted. The show became Caught in Providence. At first, it aired only on local cable. Then, with the rise of social media, clips spread worldwide. Suddenly, millions were watching the nicest judge show mercy, humor, and humanity. For 38 years, he sat on the bench, shaping lives with kindness. In January 2023, Judge Frank Caprio retired. Months later, he revealed he was battling cancer. On August 20th, 2025, he appeared from his hospital bed, asking fans for prayers. The next day, August 21st, 2025, the world lost him forever. But what he left behind was more powerful than any legal ruling. He left lessons of compassion, mercy, patience, and self-control. His courtroom became a classroom, teaching the world that justice is not only about punishment, but about humanity.